the middle of 2020, I was sitting at my desk going through my news feeds, and an interesting article popped up. It says, data scientist finds a shortest route for the ultimate road trip. Well, so I click into that. So I just sort of sit there with Google Maps, and I'm trying to draw some lines, try to disprove this article, and I sort of set it aside, but it sticks in the back of my head a little bit. A couple days later, the family goes to bed. I'm messing around with this problem again, and I was like, someone's probably solved the true shortest path through these states. So I go do some internet sleuthing, and I stumble upon another article. This one's from 2015, and this is about a team of 3 people who took a minivan and drove through all the lower 48 states of the U.S. as fast as possible and was certified by Guinness at the time, just under 95 hours. And through that, I stumbled upon Alex Roy's Apex movie. And if you watch that, it's basically a blueprint on how to dissect the problem of driving cross-country at high speed. So the next thing I do is call up my good friend Todd Heckel. So I lay this case out in front of him that there's a potential mission to be had here, maybe a different approach, maybe applying some new technology than what they had in 2015. What do you think? So I sent him the link to the Apex movie. About 3 hours later, the phone rings. Todd's like, I'm in. I watched the movie. We're doing this. And I said, okay, I'm glad you're in, but there's no this yet. I just have this sort of mad obsession playing around with maps, and I don't know anything about this cannonball stuff, and we're not really drivers. We're not race car drivers. You know what? Let's take the next step. Let's do a cannonball. Let's just go out by ourselves and drive from New York to LA and just see what we learn. And it's only about a third of the distance I think we need to travel, and that might get some information where this is a dumb idea or maybe to build on. So, and somehow we finish the course just over 36 hours. Good time for the rest of the world, pretty pedestrian time for the cannonball. But it was very important because it shaped how we're going to approach doing the lower 48 drive. And this is where sort of formulating the theory that this is not a drive like a traditional cannonball where it's just out and out speed. This is actually a competition against the human body. The clearest, very first thing we need to do is have a third driver. It's just ridiculous to do it too. I don't know what we're thinking on even the initial drive. We had a very short list, but we rapidly settled on Peter Lafort. Next, it was trying to figure out nutrition. And this was actually Peter Lafort's area that he was assigned to. And he went out and talked to nutritionists, long-haul backpackers, ultramarathoners, and he even knew someone who was a medical director in SpaceX to lay out the challenge that we're going to have in front of us. And interestingly, through all that calculus, all those endpoints settled on the same recommendation, which was peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Another really important thing was being very militant about the sleep schedules. So there's 3 people in the car. You have a driver, a spotter operating on the equipment, and a sleeper, a person in the back. We converted the back seat into a bed using an inflatable mattress and taking out some of the other door panels within the S-Class to create more space. And every 4 hours, we would change positions. Additions to the car, we added a light bar, we had to add yet another antenna for the internet, and we also added a fuel cell to the rear for 2 reasons. One, that we would be in very remote regions that were off our interstates as part of the route for the lower 48, and we just needed the fuel. But more importantly, we need enough range on the tank in hours such that when we did a driver change, we can coincide it with a fuel stop. So we had roughly about 9 hours of fuel in the tank. If we did cycles every 4 hours, the first shift would be 4-hour shift, and then the next one we would do a fuel stop in the shift. So we would never have to wake up the person sleeping just because we're filling up the gas tank. One of the really big considerations was the route, and that fell on my shoulders. I approached this problem by dividing the country in pretty standard ways. I think I had about 8 regions, the New England, the Mid-Atlantic, Southeast, Midwest, and whatnot. And within those zones, you'd say, what pathways can go through that touch all of the states within the zone? And ultimately settled on a route that basically looks like a gigantic W across the country, coming from New England, going across and finishing up in Washington State. The rules of cannonball, if there are any rules of cannonball, rather the recommendation cannonball is that the time of year that you pick to go is really important. You don't want to pick cannonball to go through high traffic areas. And you also don't want to pick times when there's lots of variability in weather. So you don't pick it in January, there's going to be a lot of snowstorms and you can't drive fast. And you also, when you're going to plan a cannonball, you want to have some alternative dates. So if the date you pick Even though it might be good for traffic, if there's weather, you can say, let's go to an alternate weekend. So with a lot of research in mind, we did none of the above. We picked the peak week to drive from a traffic perspective, the week of 4th of July. And Hurricane Elsa had just landed in the Gulf Coast and was barreling up right when we were thinking about starting. Queued up the car at the border between Vermont and New Hampshire. I had to pick an iconic spot to start, so we found a place that sounded pretty cool. It's called Wicked Awesome Barbecue. Very good barbecue, and I'm hoping by mentioning this, I'll get a free pulled pork sandwich one day. We started the journey. We knew that we were really hard pressed because Elsa was coming up the coast, and we had to clear Delaware to swing a hard right to go west so we can clear the storm. We're making pretty good time through New England, and we started picking up the weather in New Jersey. And in fact, there was starting to be standing water on the road, and we actually couldn't even go the speed limit. But we knew we had to press on, and there's actually a picture we took from the storm system right when we got to Delaware and hung that sharp turn where like the eye of the storm was coming up, and we missed it probably by about 30 miles as it was coming up through Baltimore. We're sort of in pace, lost a little bit of time for Elsa, and we're coming down into Georgia. We hit Atlanta, peak rush hour, Thursday or Friday afternoon at 4:30 p.m. And what should be a drive overnight of 45 minutes through the city became a 3.5-hour slog. We even got a peach pass, which is sort of getting the express lane, didn't matter. It was the most frustrating part of the entire trip. And so anyone who lives in Atlanta, my hat's off to you for putting up with that. We're in Indiana. Peter Fort and I are up the front. And there's a tremendous light show going outside. Some huge storm, lots of lightning. It's really beautiful. There's not much else out there other than us. And we're driving, and Peter's like, what's that? I'm like, what? And then it's like we just drove right into a swimming pool. It was like, there was no ramp. There was no like dotted range. It was just like, boom. Can't see the road. Can't see our headlights. It's deafening loud. Todd's in the back. He wakes up. What the hell's going on? And we're on the interstate. I was going like, 100 plus 1 minute, and we're in a swimming pool. And I don't know. I'm slowing down. It's like, Peter, I can't even find the road. I don't even know where we are. So I'm like, I have to just stop. We just stopped dead in the interstate. It probably felt like it was an hour. It was probably in reality more like 5 minutes. This deluge was just amazing. Some storm went over us. But during that time we're in the car, I was just sitting there. Like, I think it was probably the first time. I was like, what the heck? What are we doing? Like, we're out here, like, proving to no one. No one is ever out here. We're just proving ourselves that we can, like, draw a map and kind of drive fast. And it's just, kind of crazy to do that. Anyway, we kept going. We pick up mission, we join the States, coming around about Chicago, and then we run into our number one fan. It's our only fan. The only person we saw on the route that actually knew we were on the route that actually came out to see us. Turns out that Peter Fort's mother had been tracking us, and Peter was talking, and she lived in the suburbs of Chicago. And somehow she figured out, like an overpass that was not open to pedestrians. I don't know how she crawled up, but she was like on the road and wearing a bright red jacket, and we're like coming towards Rockford, and we see her waving her arms, and we videotape it, and it was a good morale boost. It was great for Peter, but it was good for all of us to say, hey, at least someone's acknowledging that we're doing this thing. All this time we've been driving, we've slowly been eroding the 80-hour goal. We probably have taken about 5 hours of penalties. We're hovering around an 84, 85-hour transit between the weather and the traffic. And I said, guys, I have a surprise for you. I have something that I haven't told you about, but I've been thinking about for a while. That's an open question. What if I told you I could cut an hour of time off the trip, but you have to take a leap of faith? I have found what appears to be a path. I think it's once a converted trailhead, and it might be a gravel road. It's now routable. It's not on Google. It's not on Waze. But, I've walked it a dozen times through the satellite, and it looks like it's a road. And if we do this, we can cut the cord in Montana and save about an hour. We got to try it. Spirit's high. So we're in South Dakota. We find the exit we want. We're heading due west into Montana. The road's getting narrower and narrower, getting more rustic. And we get to what's sort of like this dry sort of creek bed, sort of gully, and the bridge is out. And next to it, someone sort of dug, like in the two embankments, sort of drive a car. So we took the S-Class down one embankment, out on a dirt embankment, and then we sort of in this broad sort of entry zone where there's a bunch of gravel. I said, guys, I think this is it. It sort of maps where I think it should be. And to sort of describe this, it varied between loose gravel and very loose gravel. It was not a very good road. The maximum we can do is about 40 miles an hour. The daylight was going down, but we had this rooster tail behind the car. It was about 10 feet tall, rocks everywhere. It sounded like we're destroying the car, just eating the undersides out, and no one saying a word. We get about 5 minutes in, 10 minutes, it's not getting better. And Todd's driving, and he's like, Grady, what the hell is this? Are you really seriously? Should we double back? I mean, and I said, trust me, it's gonna pan out. So we persisted. Dusk became night. And sure enough, it was 22, 23 miles long and ended exactly where I thought it was. And we saved ourselves an hour of the trip. At the end of Kansas, we had a fuel stop, and this is really the only trouble we had with the law. We had a fuel stop, we did a driver swap. It's morning, probably about 10 a.m. It's a small town. Todd takes over as driver, and usually when you start your driver shift, you have a little bit of adrenaline. You want to kind of get up and go and start going on. I'm in the spotter seat, Peter's awake in the back. Todd comes out of this gas station and just really peels out and goes. There's a stop sign right there. Goes through that. Why not? And on the other side of this, there's an older person driving a very slow car. Let's just go around that too. Cross the double yellow line at speed. Come back. And about 100 yards later, we see in the sort of gully next to the road, a Kansas state trooper pointing right at us, flicks the lights on. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I looked at a lot of the state laws, and I think in some of the states, if you have 3 consecutive moving violations, it's like a felony. That's a game over. They take you in the car. I don't know if Kansas is one of these, but I said, Todd, this might be a big deal. So Todd, step on the brakes. We're closing really fast on the car, and I'm in the passenger side, and all I can think to do is wave to the cop. Say, hey. And the cop sort of leans over the window, like, wags a finger at us, and like, you guys don't do that again. And about 50 yards later, we see this big sign that says, welcome to Oklahoma. And so how I like to tell the story in a bar is that we ran from the state police across state lines to evade them. The reality is that they were just too lazy to chase us. On top of all things, and the hurricanes and everything else, I recalled that there were 2 unfortunate flocks of birds in my very spirited drive in Kansas, and I didn't recall seeing all the birds sort of get out of the way. It says there might be some birds, and I'm actually really concerned about cooling. And I said, we gotta get out and check the grill. And sure enough, we go around, and there's bird parts and blood. Open up the hood, and there's at least 2, maybe more, complete birds impacted in the veins of the radiator. And this is not good. This car we've literally not turned the car off, even at the pumps, for like almost 4 days now. And I'm like, we got to do something about this. So I get 2 trash bags as gloves. Spent about 10 minutes just raking bird parts out and trying to fix the veins. Took a picture of the radiator grill. We had on standby my mechanic back in Pennsylvania, Eris of Continental Automotive, who had helped prep the car. Sent a picture. You think you're good with this? And he's like, it's dicey, but we don't see any punctures. We think you're good to go. So Chrysler Verta, we made it around. Todd and Peter were very generous in their last shifts. When I was sleeping, they had worked out a plan where they timed it such that they would give me the last shift. And it was very nice of them. So I had the last shift coming through Oregon, crossing the river into Washington State, pretty much in the middle of nowhere. I think I was driving half the speed limit. I didn't want to wreck the car. I don't have a cop. I just want to get done. And we come across the state line, check off the state, and we had gotten the record. It was 86 hours and 19 minutes, almost 9 hours better than the prior attempt. There were 3 people there to meet us. Peter had 3 friends who were in the area. Pulled off basically on the shoulder of the road, took pictures, had some champagne. It wasn't this big hoopla. It's I think because we're tired or just the gravity of what we did. We didn't really realize what we did probably until weeks after. And so we've been outside the car for about an hour. Peter with his friends to the wine country in Washington State. Todd lived in Seattle, and that's where my flight was going to be out. So we got back in the car to drive to Seattle a couple hours. And upon entering the car, I immediately start dry heaving. It smells of all kinds of humanity, rotten food, feet, who knows what. But you don't sense that when you're living in it. But when you've had a chance to smell clean air for an hour or 2 and you get back in, it was disgusting. Ben, Charlie Safari, Wilson gave me a call. He was the lead person watching the run along with a bunch of other people to help certify it. He was in New Zealand. It was a very nice call. And I also got a call from Chris Clemens, who I'd never met. but he called me and welcomed me to the Long Distance Drivers Club. He had recently set the record for doing the New York to LA, back to New York run. He had very kind words to say. It was very nice to the call. And I sat on the edge of bed, fully clothed, my phone in my hand. I was like, I should probably go get dinner. Next thing I know, it was 8 hours later. I'm still on the edge of the bed, my feet are dangling. I'm there, the phone's still in my hand. I had 8 hours of a dreamless sleep. It was like a time warp. And it was funny because we thought that we were probably fresh enough. We probably had one more day in us. I think we were at the very edge of fumes to make sure it's going. Looking back and you think about a drive of this magnitude, it's really hard to sort of summarize it all. I attempt to do that here, but there's just so much more to say. And when I talk to people, I don't really talk about the time or the finish. It's about the journey that got us here. It's about finding this dumb article and sort of coaxing my friends into following a dream that none of us really knew the end state. Hopefully this tale can show you that, if you have something that interests you, double click on it. Go down the rabbit hole just a little further. You never know where you're going to end up. For me, I ended up driving across the country, meeting this whole community of drivers, which have embraced me and I've embraced. I'm very great friends. I really have stories to share for a lifetime. It got me in this chair. That was definitely not the goal, but somehow I ended up here. And I think really it's that this is proof that sometimes the journey really is the destination.
Caramel is the perfect hack for any private party vehicle transaction. They'll make your deal run faster, safer, and smoother than you ever thought possible. And Caramel works with any buying or selling platform because they step in after you've made a deal to take care of all of the paperwork for the transaction and also all the forms and paperwork that you need with any DMV in any state to get your car registered and titled. They protect both buyer and seller by safely verifying identities, and they connect to both bank accounts so that you don't have to worry about wire transfers, certifying checks, and all the other risks that usually go with a private party transaction. And for a limited time, Caramel is free to both buyers and sellers. Of course, you can add things like shipping and protection packages and things like that, but all of that is optional. So check them out now at drivecaramel.com or at the link in the description below.